This is Henry Chamberlain, and I'm speaking with Charles Zan Christensen, publisher of Northwest Press. And we're discussing, among other things, but at the beginning we're going to be discussing Anything That Loves, which is an anthology that has a focus on human sexuality beyond the gay, straight terms that we're so used to. And Will talks about the fluidity of sexuality, and it brings to mind to me John Lennon's comment, we're all gay, which I think it's a poetic way of saying everybody just get over yourselves. Mm-hmm. And so that's where I'd like to jump off. Do you think that's pretty much sums it up in a funny and good way?
I think that what he might kind of be getting at is that there's this kind of germ of or little seed of something in all of us that attracts us to other people, and those might be people of the same or different gender than us. And I think that what we've done as a society is we've made it criminal, I mean sometimes literally, for people to express, my cat is meowing, to express that affection. And so if you have a little bit inside you, it might not be dominant, it might not be even really significant other than something that comes and goes in you, but it tends to label you as one thing. So if you have a relationship with a man, even though you're mostly attracted to women, people will say that you're gay, you're closeted, and you're hiding it or whatever, as opposed to just accepting the reality of your situation and how things can change. And so I think that's important to get outside of the whole yes, no, something's going to taint you. Like if you have a gay experience, then you're automatically going to be more gay than everybody else. I think that there's a lot of oversimplification going on for a very long time. I think it's getting to the point now where we can kind of unpack a lot of that.
I would say it's the human condition, so everybody get over yourselves.
Yes.
And I think that the more well-read you are, the more like you're fine with yourself. Mm-hmm. I think of like Dave Eggers made some comment about it. Well, I don't know what percentage I am this or that, but I can't worry about that.
Right.
But the more you read in literature, the more literate you are, I think the less problems you're going to have.
Well, I think people interpret stuff differently. I think that as gay identity grew as a thing, when people were much more willing to stand up and be counted, and it was much more a political act. It was a self-preservation thing.
Yeah.
I think that changed how we looked at literature and how we looked at history. And we would see, my cat is going to keep meowing. I actually kind of want to stop a second so I can figure out how to make him. Yes. So.
Well, I was just thinking that the more that you read and whatever, you'll feel better, but it doesn't necessarily change. It doesn't change the world at large.
Right. Well, so I think that people definitely can dig and they can find stories of people living outside of boundaries and boxes and, having the courage to kind of forge their own paths and live something that's not categorized. But I think that what happened in the 60s, 70s, 80s, when gay identity became much more of a political act, like coming out was not just, here's me and my truth. It was more like, I'm going to join a movement and a community. And I think that the instinct was the habit was to look at history, find instances of people having same-sex relationships and attractions, and adopt those people and make a lot of assumptions about the rest of their lives, sometimes true and sometimes founded in fact, and sometimes more kind of just guessed at, about the totality of their experience. And I think that we've classified a lot of people as straight and as gay, really ignoring parts of their lives that are also important. And I think that when you look at it in that way, you look at it as a spectrum, going from all the way gay to all the way straight, I think very few people live at either end. And I think that it might be a semantic point, but I think it's an important point to acknowledge that and to see that as a commonality that we all share, because I think there's too much separation from the straight and gay communities, and there's too much separation from bisexuality from everything else. because of this kind of mistrust about crossing over these lines.
And I guess at the lowest common denominator, the celebrity culture helps whenever you hear about this person's life, and it's not necessarily all straight. That at the lowest common denominator, that helps too.
Yes, yes. I mean, there's definitely problems with people's privacy being trampled upon. I mean, people who are or aren't public figures having their private lives scrutinized. I guess the silver lining is that we do get to see more of the unvarnishedness, less of the kind of this is the image I'm putting forth, and more of the unvarnished life. So I think that one of the goals of the book for me is to just show lots of people's stories, and I really wanted to not have it be, comic after comic teaching people like, oh, here's bisexuality, and like here's a broad, introduction. I really want people to get specific and like show a story that's more complicated than even the topic is, and let people see a part of your life that is in some ways very familiar and in some ways very, very different from the reader, potentially. And then as a whole, you end up with a book that's, like the reason I did this cover the way I did was that it... see
if I can zoom in a little bit.
Yeah, it's we're using all the different stories in it's like some placeholder text, but I'm using all the different stories in the artwork because that's the important thing. The important thing is that categories are useful in some ways for political reasons, to gain acceptance and to gain political power and freedom and keeping those human rights. Those are all very important things for categories. But when it comes to people, I think we need to let go of a lot of that, and we need to look at people as individuals, and look at everybody as very complicated and very different, but united in that difference. Like that, everybody is going to have their weird stuff. I think that's exciting to me, and it's much more important to me than clinging to kind of a defensive posture, trying to keep the straight community at bay because I fear that they might be negative to me. Like, well, they might, but I think that we can be a coalition as opposed to a block.
Yeah, I think that's a really great way to go about it. To go to specific human stories, and that will speak to the bigger issue.
Yeah.
Well, I want to ask you to talk a little bit about Northwest Press, and maybe talk about yourself and how you came about bringing Northwest Press into existence.
Yeah, I was involved in comics fandom. I was a comics reader for like most of high school, or most of junior high school and a little high school, and then after college I got back into it. But I got back into it and really wanted to do more, wanted to read more comics that were about gay life, because as a kid I always kind of flocked to kind of the X-Men and things that were kind of subtly or not so subtly veiled allusions to gay rights or civil rights, and so I liked that analogy. But then as I grew up, I'm like, I want to dig in and get more slice of life stories, more autobiographical stuff, more indie stuff that actually tackles all of the complexities of gay life more. And so I got involved with some fan organizations, started joining conventions, started helping out Andy Mangels, who's been active in comics activism or LGBT issues for 25 years or more. Started helping him on a publication he did every year that he handed out at Comic-Con, which was basically a guide to who's queer in comics, called Out in Comics. And then from that, after doing that for a few years, that kind of grew into Prism Comics with me and a bunch of other people from the Gay League of America, which is a fan organization. Kind of got together, founded this organization, and got ambitious and wanted to do grants and wanted to do a lot more convention appearances. Wanted to have a big website with all kinds of features and resources on it, working with publishers and working with community groups and doing a lot of outreach. And so Prism Comics has been going for about 10 years now, entering its 10th year. So it's very, very exciting that something that I helped to found, and then now I'm an advisory capacity to, is still going strong and still doing lots of great work. So that's how I got started with gay comics. And then about 3 years ago, I stepped back, a little bit from doing Prism stuff and started doing Northwest Press because I wanted to see if I could make a business out of publishing the work that I saw that wasn't finding a home.
Yeah.
There was lots of, actually the first project was John Macy's book, Teleny and Camille, and you'll notice that there's a little medal on there because it won a Lambda Literary Award after it was published. Won a Lambda Literary Award in 2011. But this book was great. He'd been working on it for 8 years. It's an adaptation of a Victorian novel, and he didn't have a publisher for it. And so he was going to do it self-published. And I was going to, of course, help as much as I could to get the word out and get him enough readers. But I just felt like there should be a company behind him. There should be an entity behind him to help him, do the best he can. Because I know that artists they're artists and they're not always marketers and advertisers and all these things.
That's a lot.
Yeah. And so I thought, well, can I be that person? Can I step in and do that work and get better at it so I can help people to do this? And so I published him. I published Justin Hall's Glamazonia that same year in 2010. And then I published a collection of David Kelly's Stevens comics strips, Rainy Day Recess. And then I started publishing people who people hadn't heard of yet, like Rick Worley's A Waste of Time, which is a webcomic. It's really, really funny and sarcastic and misanthropic and overly sexed. And then The Legend of Bold Riley, Lesbian Sword and Sorcery Adventure, and then Transposes, the newest book by Dylan Edwards, which is also up for a Lambda Literary nomination right now for transgender fiction, or transgender nonfiction. This is actually a collection of comics about the lives of transgender men who are also gay or bi or queer. And it's all true stories. And so he's collected and told these stories of these men. And it's similar I think it does a similar thing to what I Hope Anything That Loves does, which is tell a whole bunch of specific stories about people who are united in some general way, but that are very different, because everybody's very different. And gives people an insight into the humanity of other people who have a bold stroke difference, possibly, from the reader.
I was checking that out last night. I look forward to reviewing that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it seems it's still the mainstream. I'm thinking maybe 20 years back. It was still 30 years back, still embracing sameness. Mm-hmm. And we're making strides. We're definitely making strides, but it's still kind of like we've got a ways to go.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that living in Seattle, and being in kind of a big urban environment that's very progressive and very lefty, I have the luxury of kind of digging into this stuff with a bit more nuance than a lot of people can. I mean, people living in other countries have a terrible time. I was reading about, like in Iraq, people being targeted online, like people going into gay chat rooms, finding people, and then tracking them down, killing them. I mean, there's no time. There's a time and place for subtlety and nuance and deep exploration, and then there's a time for survival and banding together. And I think that depending on where you are in the country, it might be different for you. Mm-hmm. I think that ultimately we all want to get to some place where we're all just plain human beings. But there's still a need for support, and there's still a need for banding together and relishing the sameness and the unity in some ways of the gay community or transgender community. But I think that we have to do that with an eye toward what the truth is at the human level, that so we don't divide ourselves so much. Like I get irritated by the fact that so often in gay publications they'll be like, oh, lists of straight people we love, and like 10 straight people are awesome. I'm like, well, can't we reach a point where if somebody's that devoted and doing that much good work and helping other people be accepted and welcomed, can't we get to the point where they're in the community? I mean, why are they at a distance and we're like cheering them at the edges instead of embracing them and bringing them in? And I think that a lot of people, because of the kind of the defensive, admittedly it's a functional thing, a defensive nature of the gay community, people aren't really ready for that. Like they want people to have cred and say like, you have to live this life and face the struggles I've faced in order to be part of us. I think that's hopefully lessening. I think we're reaching the point now where we can be much less litmus testy about who we embrace and welcome into our community.
Very well said. I wanted to close with whatever you'd like to say about the future of Anything That Loves. It's going to debut at Comic-Con, as I understand. And then what follows, or just let us know.
Well, yes, I will.
Well, it's also a Kickstarter.
It is, and so yeah, we're. I put the Kickstarter together. I started doing Northwest Press full time only in January, so it's very very new that I'm depending on this for my livelihood. And there were some things I always wanted to do, like I always wanted to do a pre-sale of a book in a big way to try and raise operating funds in advance instead of having to go into debt each time I did a book. I'm still very much in debt from the earlier books. I'm building a catalog. New businesses always suck up money at first until they get kind of established. I have everything going on. I'm so happy. We started the Kickstarter. We set a goal of $10,000, which is about how much it's going to cost to print the first book. Probably a little bit more than that when all the expenses are taken into account. But that was a good starting point. And we blew past that in the first few days. Made it to $15,000 in the next few days. Got to $20,000 a few days ago. So every time we reach a goal over our $10,000, every $5,000, we get to pay the contributors and can pay them more each time. Now we have $3,000 set aside to pay the people who've given their work. I mean, they gave their work not thinking they were going to get paid at all.
Yeah.
So it's good to if it takes off like it has, it's imperative that we give them some money and say thank you. So they're going to get paid. All the royalties from the sales of the book are going to Prism Comics, as I mentioned before. Even though I'm not a voting board member anymore, I'm still on the advisory board. I still support the work they do. So to date, I think we've raised over $1,000 for them.
Wow.
Just for the Kickstarter, because they're getting all of the book sales that are going out as rewards. I'm treating them as pre-sales, so people they're still helping Prism Comics when they pledge to us. So we're going to release the book. We might actually get it out a little bit early and do a little sneaky introduction at a convention called LeakyCon, which is a play on Leaky Cauldron. It's a Harry Potter convention.
Oh, wow.
That's happening in Portland in June. And that convention is based on not only love of genre and fantasy and comics and things like that, but it's also has a big charitable component. And so I thought it would be a good place to bring it, because they're very gay friendly and very queer supportive in that community. And I know that this project might be a good, an interesting place, an interesting one to bring there. And it does have a charitable aspect to it, so I think it might be a good place to do that.
Very good.
And then I have lots of books. I'm doing tons of projects right now. I'm doing my first prose project, which is called The Lavender Menace. Which is a collection of short stories about super villains who are gay, which is really, really fun and sexy. Has a cover by Joe Phillips, the comics artist and boy pinup wizard. And then there's a book called Al-Qaeda's Super Secret Weapon, which is off the hook. It is an erotic political parody or satire. Which assumes that John McCain was right, that gays will destroy the military. But the plan is that Al-Qaeda recruits a bunch of men to infiltrate the gay community first, and then enlist, and then come out, and to hilarious effect. And that is just really, really sexy and incredibly witty and really, really biting. It's I don't think people have seen something quite like this before. But all those books are coming out relatively soon, all by Comic-Con. And then in the fall, in time for Alternative Press Expo in San Francisco, there's going to be a new anthology, a brand new anthology, 300-plus page book edited by Robert Kirby, who did Curbside and Boy Trouble, and who currently does the book 3, which is a little anthology collection of 3 different creator teams every issue. He's putting together a book of 33 cartoonists, kind of established and brand new, all new material. It's going to be in this giant, huge book called Queer, with 33 as the E's, so Queer. And that is going to be astounding. So I'm going to do these 3 books kind of all at once, and then catch my breath for a few months, and then this book is going to come out, and it's going to be a monster, and it's coming out in October.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much.
Thank you
very much.